Good evening, members. Um, this evening we have no chairman or vice chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee due to absence. So I'll need to take nominations from the floor for a chairman for the meeting. Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I propose Councillor Berrybond.
Thank you. So we have a proposal. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Cox. Any other nominations? Is everyone in favour of Councillor Bond acting as chairman? Thank you. Councillor Bond.
Thank you, members. I have been told that the record for a short meeting was 7 minutes, and I'm going to try to exceed it, but I don't think that's going to be possible tonight. Right, the first item on the agenda, members, is the minutes of. Oh, sorry, I should remind you that this is a public meeting, and as such is being recorded, and I won't repeat everything that Mr. Hayward said at the start of the council meeting, but remind you that you are giving your consent to take part in the meeting and for your information to be used for the public. Right, so minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny meeting held on the 24th of May. Can we adopt those as being a true record? Thank you. Do you want me to sign those? Okay. Thank you. Are there any apologies?
I've received apologies from councillors Jackson, P. Davis, Ewart, Fisher, Kinsey, Merrick and Sutton.
Thank you. Councillor Banton, thank you. Any other apologies from the floor? No? Right. Are there any declarations of interest? I suppose in terms of item 4, we're all council taxpayers, so we do have a pecuniary interest or a reverse pecuniary interest, whichever way you want to look at it. But I think we do have an interest in how the council. Yes, we probably get dispensation. No declarations of interest. We'll move on to item 4, the Integrated Performance Management Report year end, and that's going to be presented by Mr. Shakespeare, Director of Finance and Resources. Right, sorry, Councillor Lees is going to start. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'd like to start off, if I may, and we'll hand over afterwards. Integrated Performance Management, or the IPM Report 21-22 Year-End Report. The Integrated Performance Management Report provides a combined update as of the 31st of March 22 on performance, finance and risk. This includes year-end results against performance targets set to monitor delivery of the Council Plan for 2024. Overall performance remains strong, especially against the backdrop of such a challenging year. The report will be presented by Mrs. Roberts and Mr. Shakespeare, but first I would like to call on Mr. Hayward to say a few words.
Thank you, Councillor Lees. Before handing over, good evening again, members. Before handing over to Annette and Peter to go through the integrated performance management, I'd like to give a general overview of the last 12 months in relation to performance. We all know the last 12 months, the last 3 years actually, has been an incredibly challenging time for the council. At various stages during the pandemic, the council has adjusted its operating model to deal with the ongoing pressures felt from COVID and produce targeted plans to deliver services effectively, and importantly, continue to meet the council's overarching priorities within the council plan. As we've emerged from the pandemic, we're now seeing unprecedented inflation rises, intensified by the Ukrainian crisis, which in turn is starting to have an impact on our communities, and we'll start to see an impact on council services too in the not too distant future. Tonight's about looking back over the last 12 months, but I also want to use this evening to set out what we'll be focusing on over the coming months at the end of the presentation by Peter and Annette. As the leader has said, overall performance has been very good. It hasn't been without its challenges, though. For me personally, I felt incredibly proud when the council was awarded UK Council of the Year by IEC. I'm extremely pleased with our new community hub. Every time I walk in, I can't help thinking how fantastic the hub has turned out, given the challenges we had and the difficult decisions as members you had to make in agreeing to continue with the project at the height of the pandemic and when so much was being delayed elsewhere. It's been a very difficult time for some of our services. For example, our local plan experienced immense pressure from parts of the community during the last consultation period back in the autumn. It's been relentless for welfare services straight out of COVID, and the team had to deal with the fallout of the cost of living crisis. They've also stepped in and led the support for the Ukrainian families who have been matched with sponsors from within the district, and are now having to deal with the potential of coordinating the possibility of Afghan refugees being dispersed across the district. And this is on top of their business as usual activities. And of course, we all know the problems we've experienced in waste this year with a shortage of HGV drivers, which has led to delays in our waste collections, and the impact the rollout of the blue bags and the knock-on effect that this has had, for example, on our contact centre during a very inconsistent service provided by our contractor Biffa. But I always say, given the nature of our business and the fact that we manage 23 different services, 17 of which are outward facing, we are always going to experience some of the issues that we'll have to overcome. It's inevitable. And what I'd like to do now is just share with you an infographic we presented to Cabinet a couple of months ago. I think, is it on the screen? Yeah, it's on the screen now. You can have a look. Granted, it needs updating, and I can circulate this because you can't see it clearly on the screen. But it does give you a flavour of the volume of work, and just picking out a couple of highlights. The community hub, I've already touched on it. It's got 24 different organisations. We've actually got 27 different organisations in. And not only have we built a facility for the community for the next 30 years, generating near on £700,000 per annum at the minute, when you look at the start of the journey back in 2010, we were generating round about £10,000 a year from, we just had the library in at that point. There's some also in the hub, there's some excellent examples across service and business working that impacts on the district as a whole. So it's not just about the community, the Codsall community. It impacts on the wider villages across the district. We collect over 68,000 bins a week on average. So yeah, we are going to have mishaps. Unfortunately, it just is impossible to avoid with that many bins being collected on a weekly basis. We have over 600 fly tipping cases on an annual basis, which are resolved within 48 hours. We have a 100% performance rate. In the last 6 months, we've received 780 planning applications, of which 748 have had decisions issued. The planning enforcement team have logged and investigated 158 cases, serving 10 enforcement notices. 2,000 swimming lessons over our leisure centres, 200,000 visits to Bagridge Country Park over the last 12 months. We've supported the distribution of 60 million grants to businesses during the pandemic, of which 35 million came direct from this council. And I could go on, but I think for me, what this slide does is demonstrate we run a complex and multifunctional organisations. And yeah, granted, sometimes we don't get things quite right. We recognise that. But importantly, as soon as we know about it, we try and rectify it. And we're very mindful and very conscious of that. We work really hard during the rollout of the blue bags, and we're still working hard with the contact centre, recognising things still aren't right there. We're not still managing it how we would like to manage it, but we've got actions in place we're continually reviewing. And that, I think, what makes us a good council overall. And finally, before moving on, that reference to the bottom figure on your screen, you can probably just about make it out where, when asked, 90% on a regular basis of our residents would recommend South Staffordshire as a place to live. Now, that isn't just about the district council services, that's about what the parish offer, it's about what the county council offer, and it's about the communities themselves, how they support one another. But overall, we've got a big role to play in that in terms of that positive outcome, and we do it on an annual basis, and consistently we get that 90+ response rate. So overall, a strong year, a clean bill of health from our internal auditors, and as Councillor Michelle highlighted at a recent council meeting, a very good audit opinion from Grant Thornton, our external auditors. The Boundary Commission have commented on how impressed they were around how, as a council, we conducted our boundary review, and they'll be citing us as a council for best practice. And only yesterday, I had the Land Registry praise the council for how we've transferred the data to them. And I just passed comment on, well, surely this is the norm. And they came back and said, it's actually rare we get this kind of service from local authorities. So there's lots of good things happening, but as ever, we'll continue to learn. But a very good year with some good returns on our finances and performance measures for 2021-22 that are highlighted in the specific performance report in front of you, members, that Annette and Pete will now take you through. So I'm handing over to Annette at this point, and we'll take questions, Chairman, at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayward. So this report provides a combined update as of the 31st of March 2022 on performance, finance and risk, so effectively at the year end. And this includes risks against performance targets to monitor delivery of our council plan from the years 2020 to 2024. So we'll take all of these areas in turn, and first of all, I'll deal firstly with performance. Now, as Mr. Hayward has already set out, overall, considering the challenges that the 2021-2022 year posed, performance for the authority has been strong across the range of targets that we've had set. And I'll talk a bit of detail on those now. Highlights to this performance include the number of businesses supported, not least the grants given out in terms of the £60 million worth of grants that were supported. Planning applications determined, the strong occupancy levels across all our commercial assets, and the fly tipping incidences that have investigated. The food businesses that are compliant, and of course the council and business collection rates have remained strong. Now, all these are critical in delivering our council plan. You will note, members, that when we report throughout the year, we assign a RAG rating, so RAG being red, amber or green, against those performance rates. And to each performance area as to how they have performed at the end of the year. And at the end of the year, you'll see this report is either simply we report as red or green as to whether they have been achieved or not. So members, you'll note in the report there are 23 targets in place for the last financial year. And what this report sets out that 16 of these at the end of the year, so at the end of 31st of March 2022, were at green. And I've mentioned a couple of those just earlier on. And 5 were red. 2, as agreed, remain paused due to the pandemic and challenges in taking those forward. So of the 5 targets rated as red, these are summarised in table in 4.6. And the report details these in obviously in more detail. And where these have been identified throughout the year as being amber, or where they have been previously red, they have been discussed and plans put in place to seek to address and limit their impact, both in terms of service delivery and impact on delivery of the council plan. But it must be noted that many of these in the 5 categories set out in 4.6 were as a direct result of restrictions posed in relation to the pandemic. So that, in a nutshell, sets out the performance reports that set out in the appendix. So I'll hand you over now to Mr. Shakespeare, who will set out the financial position.
Thank you, Mrs. Roberts. As we've noted, 21-22 was another extremely challenging year, not only for South Staffordshire, but for all of local government authorities. Continued reductions in income from leisure services, further additional burdens placed upon us from central government, and calls to support the pandemic recovery have all been managed successfully. The key financial headline is that South Staffordshire ended the financial year 2021 broadly in line with forecasted expectations. Details of each service area are within the report circulated, but specific points of note. The total net annual service expenditure was 9.180 million, which represented a positive variance of 923,000 before appropriations to earmarked reserves. Once those adjustments have been made to and from the reserves, there was an addition to the general fund of £625,000. The authority also benefited from securing long-term borrowing at historically low interest rates. The bolstering of our earmarked reserves will support the authority to manage any of the recovery from COVID-19 and, of course, the inflationary and pay pressures that we're now seeing emerge throughout 22-23. Finally, the IPM report sets out the authority's strategic risks. It should be noted that COVID-19 has impacted upon a number of these strategic risks, and the Council's mitigations have been adjusted accordingly. All risks have strong mitigations in place, and no strategic risks are, at the end of the year, rated red. That concludes the report, Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Roberts and Mr. Shakespeare. Are there any questions from members? Councillor Mrs. Allen.
Thank you. I apologise for my late arrival. I've been in York. I think the questions I wanted to ask are about the servicing of the loan that we took out for the community hub, and what capacity is required in the community hub to maintain the interest payments on that loan in view of the increase in interest payments. And secondly, what percentage return do we have on the investments now? Thank you.
Thank you. Two parts to that question. The first part is that when we take out borrowing, we do it across the entirety of our capital programme. So we could look at specifics around occupation levels in the hub and give you an estimate of that, but it wouldn't be done in isolation to the hub. It's across the whole of the capital programme. What I can give you some certainty over is that that borrowing was taken at a fixed rate. So while we're seeing interest rates increasing at the moment, our rate has been fixed at around 1.5%. So it was extremely low when we took that borrowing. If we were to take that today, the lowest we could borrow is around 3.5%, so a 2% increase. In terms of the second part of the question, we've, in line with our treasury management policy that was agreed at council in February, we've now put some of our investments out for slightly longer periods, 3-month returns, and we are earning in excess of 2% interest at the moment. We're keeping the investments reasonably liquid because we are seeing the rates increase in the market. So we want those investments to come up quite regularly so we can reinvest at a higher rate. So at the moment, our borrowing that we took last year, we've factored into the MTFS at around 300,000 a year impact, and that is being fully mitigated by the interest that we're earning on our investments. So at the moment, it's net nil cost to the authority.
Yeah, just
And then just to ask about cash reserves and salaries, obviously, which have risen. I was a bit perturbed to see they've only risen at a very low rate when everyone is struggling rather with their finances, but I'm sure that's a matter for the Finance Committee. 1.5% pay rise for the wage bills. So how is the cash and liquid reserve now?
So there were the pay level that I think you're referring to was affecting last financial year, which was settled at 1.75% for most of our workers and 1.5% for senior officers. And that was managed within budgets. We'd set aside 2% as we do into our base budget to meet that. Our reserves are standing at, we've got just over 9 million now in our general fund, and then we have around a further 6 million in earmarked reserves as well. But I think that will come forward as part of our MTFS proposals in the next 2 weeks, and you'll see a position statement on that.
Can I just come in there, Chairman, just to add to what Pete's saying? The pay settlements are done at a national level, so they're not locally determined. So, you know, we can't. We obviously contribute in terms of the conversations, but it's set at that national level. So the 1.75 Pete's referring to, it's very much that national level, and we are expecting it to be extremely higher from this year onwards. And as Peter said, he'll be bringing it forward as part of the resource planning and prioritisation process.
Just to reply to that, I'm pleased to see we managed to stack up over £500,000 into the reserves again on the end of this financial year. And I'm anticipating appeals across the board for larger wage increases this year due to increasing living expenses and expenses for staff, obviously, as well. So I think from my point of view, I'm just asking for a straw in the wind, really, as to where you think this is going.
I would love to have some confidence on where it's going with all the turmoil and uncertainty at the moment. Unions are our assistant director for this area is probably best placed to answer, but unions are pitching anywhere between 9 and 11% for pay rises. And obviously before Boris left 2 weeks ago, he was at around 3%. So it will probably settle somewhere between the two. Across my networks, it seems around 4% might be where that ends up, but that's still significantly below inflation levels that we're seeing. So I think it's an unknown at the moment, but it will certainly be over the 2% that we've budgeted for.
Thank you for the reply.
Are there any other questions? No? Mr. Hayward, you wish to sum up?
Yes, if I may, Chairman. At the start of the meeting, I said I just wanted to give you an overview of what we'll be bringing forward to you for discussion. They'll be through a mixture of Teams meetings and hybrid opportunities. So this side of the, if you like, the summer recess will be giving you an overview of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, where the Council has, subject to an agreed action plan, been allocated £3.8 million over the next 3 years. And also I'll be using that opportunity to briefly update you on the new county-wide leaders board. I've sent you some correspondence on it some time ago now. The leader and I sit on that board and it's progressing nicely. So I think it's a good opportunity just to tie it into that conversation. As Peter has identified, we'll be bringing you a first look at the financial challenges for 2023 onwards as part of that resource planning and prioritisation process. We'll also, importantly, be producing a cost of living checklist that will highlight both the internal and external pressures that we need to be on top of as a council. And certainly aware of, and it's similar to what we did with living with COVID. So it's that overarching document. So again, we can give that assurance that we are covering both the internal challenges, but also the external ones too. Then from September through to the autumn, we'll be launching, or being well, the final piece of the jigsaw for the new local plan. So that will certainly be a challenging time. I'll also be setting out the council's operational priorities and delivery approach for the next 12 months and beyond. There'll be an element of looking back and how we've structured our approach over the last 5 years, but importantly, what that is leading to over the next 3 to 5 years. And the leadership team is calling our evolution programme. It will include 4 themes, and the reason we're calling it our evolution programme because there isn't necessarily anything new in there. It's just building on the last 3 to 5 years. So there's 4 elements, 4 themes to it. One is around our ways of working, so it's continuing to build on the culture that we've developed more recently. The second theme is around data and intelligence. So how we use the data and intelligence, so take the locality data sets we do, how we use it going forward to shape and design future services. The third theme is around place partnerships. So how going forward we work with the health, the police, the fire, the voluntary sector and our businesses. And the fourth theme is around our strategic operational plans, and we're referring them to our 5 plans on a page, and that includes our asset strategy, our digital strategy, our locality plus strategy, our climate change strategy, and our business partnership strategy. So these 5 areas will be presented to you individually over the autumn period for discussion and debate, giving us the opportunity to map out how we plan to deliver against those 5 strategic areas going forward. So we'll be putting slots in your diary over the next month or so. As I said, there'll be more likely to be hybrid sessions, so just keep a lookout. But I just, again, wanted to take this opportunity to reassure you that we've got a lot happening over the coming months, and we want to share with you our thoughts early in the process to get your feedback. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hayward. Right, we now move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is topic selection for the challenge panels. And that's going to be a report from Mrs. Fowkes, the Director of Legal and Governance.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. So apologies, I've got a cold, hence the mask and not speaking very well. So the report is before you. As members will see at 4.2 of your report, there are suggestions for the 3 challenge panel topics for the round of challenge panels that will commence in this autumn. They are for members' consideration and approval. The recommendation is that members agree the topics for the challenge panels. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Fowkes. Are there any questions from any members for Mrs. Fowkes? No. Does any member wish to contribute any other topics that may be considered by the challenge panels? Would anybody wish to debate the topics that are offered for the challenge panels? In which case, we will need a proposal that these are the topics for the challenge panels for the next year. So would anyone like to propose that? So that's Councillor Mrs Johnson as proposer and Councillor Mrs Kath Williams as the seconder. So can we have a vote on that? I think that looks unanimous, so thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs Fowles. So we can move on to the final item on the agenda, which is the work programme for 2022-23, and again to be presented by Mrs Fowles.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, the usual update report, just to say that obviously we are on track and delivered the proposed agenda for the 12th of July. At the next meeting of this committee, in addition to the work programme update, members are due to receive the annual update on the Climate Change Action Plan and performance against that action plan. Happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs Fowles. Are there any questions for Mrs Fowles or any comments? No, that looks like everyone's satisfied with that. So thank you very much, members. With that, I think we can safely close the meeting. So enjoy the rest of the evening. It looks quite sunny out there now, and hope you have a safe journey home.
Members, just before you all run away, some of you haven't signed the attendance register for ONS, signed it for council but not ONS. So in particular, councillors Allen, Boyle, Burnett, Chapman, Davis, Hollis, Johnson, Raven, Spencer, Bernard Williams and Kath Williams. Everybody else can go.
Members, before you go, I think we've got to thank Barry for stepping in on the emergency meeting tonight. Thank you.